everyone. So, I guess everybody is very keen on doing mid level and senior level recruitments. But often I've been faced with this particular question as to how different is it to do senior level recruitment as compared to the conventional junior mid kind of recruitment that most recruitment companies do. Now, recruiting for a senior level requires a completely different skill set. It's a skill set where when you interview a particular candidate, you need to ask the right questions. The questions when it comes to hiring senior level talent are not the same questions when it comes to hiring mid level talent. While a lot of the questions will be around the skill set of the person and the experience that the person brings on board. Some of the questions need to also be around his ability to fit into a certain kind of a culture, his ability to adapt, his ability to collaborate, etc. So these are more humane skill sets that we are going to be identifying. Now, what I'm going to do out here in this particular video is put down six skill sets that companies across the world are looking for. And in these six skill sets, I'm going to give you questions that you may want to ask the candidate and the kind of expected responses that you should look out for. Um, I'm not saying that ask all the questions. I will tell you as we go through this video as to which kind of questions to come up with, and you may choose which kind of questions to ask depending upon how your interview is going. This again is a situation where you've identified that the particular candidate is right in terms of the experience, the basic skill sets, and now it's about getting into a more intelligent conversation with that particular person. So the six skill sets that international companies, and those actually entering into India are constantly looking out for. The first skill set is the adaptability of the person. So, how adaptable is the person to difficult situations? How adaptable is a person to change? Is a question which most companies would want to get answers to. The second skill set or the second thing that companies want to look for is the ability of the person to add value to their culture. Remember, guys, culture is extremely important in any organization. It's often said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So most companies would want to look at cultural adaptability, would look at whether the person is fitting into the culture or is adding value to their existing culture. The third thing is the ability to collaborate. Uh, no longer are people expected to work in silos. No longer are there more individualistic goals and targets. Everybody works in collaboration, and we've seen more often but not that companies who look at talent which are collaborative in nature do well. People who are more collaborative in nature do much well. The fourth is the leadership, the general leadership ability in any organization, which is very, very important. Every company wants to nurture the leaders within the organization itself, and they want to check whether the candidate itself has the ability to grow. The fifth is the growth potential. How much will a candidate grow in their particular career? And the sixth is the prioritization. Now, I repeat, the six skill sets that we're looking for is adaptability, the cultural add, the collaboration, the leadership, the growth potential, and the prioritization. I made a note of few questions that I believe one can ask to identify, each of these parameters, and I've got certain answers that you can expect, and I will go down explaining each of these as I read through it. So let's look at adaptability. 69% of the hiring happens for candidates who are more adaptable in nature. Now, what kind of questions you may want to ask a candidate to identify, their ability to adapt? I've got 5 questions and I've got 5 answers. So, listen to them carefully. I'll repeat each question twice, and I will repeat each answer twice so that you're able to understand it better. First thing that you need to ask. So there are 5 questions. These you don't need to ask all these 5 questions. You can choose to decide which questions you want to ask. So the first question, and I'll read it out verbatim as I've written it down. Um, Tell me about a time when you were asked to do something you had never done before. How did you react? What did you learn? I repeat the question. Tell me about a time that you were asked to do something that you had never done before. How did you react and how did you learn? Now, what is it that you need to listen for? You know, look out for the excitement in their tone. Okay, how did they react in terms of did they show excitement in terms of tackling new challenges? Um, were they willing to move out of their comfort zone? And did they learn something valuable in the entire experience? So again, when they are answering the question, you want to see how excited they were. Okay, were they actually valuing the new learning? And did they actually feel comfortable in moving out of that comfort zone at that point of time? The second question that you may want to ask is describe a situation which you embraced when you embraced a new system or a new process or a new technology or a new idea that worked, and that was with major departments from old way and moving to the new things. So often we have seen that many organizations go through this transition of from old technology or old processes, and they need to move to a new process. A lot of candidates go through that particular journey, and we want to know as to how they were at that point of time. How did they go about doing it? So, what you want to listen to in that particular answer is their eagerness to explore new ways of working and improving based on what they learn. If they discovered a better way, whether they embraced the change. So, the answer is what you want to listen to in that conversation, right? Is whether or not they looked at that particular way of working as a better way of working. Were they looking at it as whether it would improve the way they would work? And did they embrace the change, right? So changes are going to happen in all organizations, but how did they react to that particular change in terms of a technology or a process or a better way of doing things is something that you want to learn. You don't want to look at pessimistic candidates. You don't want to look at people who are not eager to implement it. You don't want to look at people who are finding faults in the system, because every organization will constantly need to change. Now, the third question: recall a time when you were assigned a task outside your job description. How did you handle the situation? What was the outcome? Now, very, very often there are difficult times in an organization, right? And therefore, the leadership actually reaches out to their top talent and asks them to do things which were outside the framework that they are supposed to be working with. So it's beyond the scope of work which is written in the job description. And we want to know is what how did they handle that particular aspect, and what was the outcome? Now, outcome can be positive, negative, that's a separate thing, but what we need to know is how did they react to that particular aspect of the leadership asking them to do work which was beyond their job description. So the thing that I want to listen to is understanding that their job may evolve and willingness to try something new and take necessary steps to ensure that they were successful. So a lot of times what you want to listen to is whether a particular candidate is understanding that their job has now evolved, that no longer what they did was relevant to the organization, no longer what their job description was is restricted to that, and that there is an involvement in the job. They need to be mature enough to accept the fact that there is an involvement to that particular job. And what did they do in order to bring success to that, right? See, failure is good. It teaches you a lot of things, but what you also want to listen to is that what all did they do in order to bring success to that particular change in their job description that they were supposed to look at. The fourth question that comes in the adaptability segment is, tell me about the biggest challenge you have had to deal with. How did you adapt to the change? I'll repeat the question. Tell me about the biggest challenge that you've had to deal with, and how did you adapt to that change? Now, what is it that you want to listen for? Acceptance. Okay, the first thing that you want to listen for is that the person was accepting that there was a challenge, okay, and that the change was inevitable. It was going to happen, it was inevitable. That they focused on how to adapt successfully, evaluating a new situation, and finding the support that they needed. Now, this is a critical thing. So, challenges are going to come out, okay, but you also want to look at people who were willing to accept it as a change, who were willing to adapt to it successfully. How did they adapt to it, and are they asking for support from their peers? Remember, no one is in this to no one is in this alone, right? So you want to find out whether the person is okay to ask others for support. Okay, people who ask others for support are not weak. People who ask others for support are actually strong enough, are adaptable enough, because that's what working culture nowadays calls for. The fifth question is, tell me about a time when you had to adjust to a colleague's work style in order to complete a project and achieve your outcomes. Obviously, when people work together, uh, they have to adapt to someone else's working style as well, right? So I may have a particular working style, you may have a particular style. You want to check whether the candidate is okay to adapt to the person's working style, okay? And what did they do in order to get ensure that the entire project got completed? What you want to listen for is their willingness to be flexible, right? So those words like, I was flexible enough, those things that they say during the conversation which show flexibility is very much something that you should be listening for. um, they also have the ability to reflect on what they learned in their experience at this point of time. When you are adapting to the opposite person's working style, uh, you need that intuitive nature to for people to know that, okay, while they're adapting, they're also learning a new way of doing things, right? So you also want to listen to whether the candidate is listening, or sorry, is actually realizing that they are learning new things. And obviously, not everything that they learn is going to be good or bad. So you also want to listen to whether they learned the good way of working, or they've learned the and they love the bad way of working as well. So both these things is something that you want to look out for. So these were my 5 questions when it came to adaptability, right? I again repeat, you don't need to use all these 5 questions all the time. You can choose, you can use one, you can use two, you can use three if you are more interested in knowing the adaptability of the person. Moving for the second segment, which is the cultural add, right? A person who adds value to a culture actually increases the revenue of the organization by close to 30%. This is an international statistic that comes in place. Now, again, culture is very, very important, and therefore I've got 5 questions when it comes to culture. I've got 5 questions and 5 answers. What are the 3 things that are most important to you in a job? I repeat the question. What are the 3 things that are most important to you in your job? Right? Now, what is it that you are looking out for? So you're looking out for alignment between what's important to them and what role the company has to offer. Okay, so The idea is you want to know what are the things that are important for them in that particular job, okay, and does it match with what the company is offering. Remember guys, if you are just going to be bringing in a person for the sake of closing a position and not checking whether what the candidate is looking out for is matching with what you're willing to offer, you're hiring the wrong talent, right? And that's not great. It's actually going to be resulting into a situation where the candidate will be very, very dissatisfied and will leave the organization sooner than later. Okay. The second question that you may want to ask is, tell me about a time when in the last week when you've been satisfied, you felt energized, been productive at your work. What were you doing? I think this is a great question. So you want to know what happened in the last week, as close as last week, when the candidate felt satisfied, energized, and felt productive at work. What were they doing, right? This really brings a lot from them. Um, Now, what is it that you want to listen for? An indication that the work environment and day-to-day responsibilities are right for them, right? So obviously you have a particular work environment, you have certain day-to-day responsibilities. You want to know whether that work environment or that day-to-day responsibilities that they're going to do are going to make them feel productive, energized, okay, and satisfied. Remember, you're not going to be able to bring a euphoria every single time in our work, right? There's going to be what we call work as usual, right, or business as usual, and your daily routine, right? So if a person is not going to feel energized or satisfied or productive doing what they're currently doing in your work environment, then hiring that candidate is not a good idea. What's the most interesting thing about you that's not on your resume, right? uh, I repeat, what's the most interesting thing about you that's not on your resume? Now, what is it that you want to listen for? Signs that candidate has something new and unexpected to your culture, even if it's unrelated to the specific role. I repeat, signs that a candidate brings something which is new and unexpected to your culture, even if it's something that is not specific to their role. Uh, every candidate that joins your organization brings something new. They need to add to their culture, right? To the culture of our organization. If they're not bringing something new, it's like no addition happening, right? If it's just a herd that is joining your organization is not growing. Remember, your company and your culture in the company needs to evolve, right? A growing culture or a growing company needs to get something new coming in, even if it's something that is unexpected, right? And maybe it's something that is unacceptable, you may want to communicate to the particular candidate, but I think you need to know more about the particular candidate, which is as compared to what is mentioned in the CV. And believe you me, when you ask this question, you will be able to find out a lot more about the candidate, because a resume is just a page or two, right? But there's a lot more to any person than just a particular document. My fourth question is, what would make you choose our company over others? Now, this is extremely critical. Um, Today, candidates have multiple options, and therefore, you want to know what is it that the candidate is looking for in your company, and it would make the person join your company versus others. Now, obviously, this is what you need to look out for. You need to look out for thoughtful and honest answers that tell you what they really are thinking, not what they think you want to hear, right? A lot of times, they kind of, candidates kind of tell you things that you want to hear. Now, obviously, as an interviewer, you're very pleased when you listen to things that you want to hear. Believe you me, that's not the best way of recruiting talent, right? You need to ensure that you have honest answers, uh, even if there are things that you don't want to hear, right? But you need honest answers, and that's something that uh, that's important, and they need to tell you what actually is going on there in the head. So when you're listening to a particular candidate, make sure you're paying attention to whether these are honest answers and whether it's actually going on their head, or are they trying to fool you in this entire situation because they want you to just hire them. My fifth question is, what's the biggest misconception your coworkers have had about you, and why do you think that? So, again, what is the biggest misconception that your coworkers have about you, and why do you think that that's the way it is? Now, what you want to listen for is self reflection and transparency. You obviously need a candidate at a senior level to be able to reflect on himself or herself. And you want that person to be open, saying that, okay, you know what, I've thought about this and this is why I'm talking about it transparently. The best answers will demonstrate that the candidate is open with and around people around them, right? So again, I repeat, self-reflection and transparency. The best answers will demonstrate that the candidate is open with people around them, right? Um, I want to reiterate a particular fact. No candidate is perfect, right? But a candidate should be able to reflect and must be able to accept what's there, should be open to taking critical feedback of people around them, and should be able to take feedback. Forget about just critical feedback, any feedback, and should be willing to say transparently that, you know what, I had this particular shortcoming, and I took over it with the feedback of others, and I'm transparently sharing with you how I dealt with this particular situation. A candidate who's able to do that will add a lot of cultural value to your organization. So these are my 5 questions regarding the cultural aspect that you want to look out for. The third aspect, and this is really important, right? People who have collaborative skill sets. Um, the top 50%, top 50% leaders in the world have a collaborative skill set. And trust me, as time goes by, this is not going to be a possibility of missing out on. One needs to be collaborative in the effort, and that's something that is really, really important. Now, I'm going to come up with 5 questions, which are, which you need to check upon to check with this. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the most popular one. Um, Give an example of when you had worked with someone who was difficult to get along with. How did you handle that interaction with the person? Not everybody in this world is easy to get along with. You will definitely, in your day to day work, have someone that's not very easy to work along with. And you need to ask that question because every candidate would have had that particular situation. And you want to know how that candidate handled the situation. How did he handle the interaction with that particular person? Now, what is it that you're listening for? A willingness to try to see things from the other person's perspective by identifying the cause of the tension and finding ways to improve the relationship. So, you want to also check whether the candidate is okay to look at it from the other person's perspective, right? And is able to understand why there is a tension between him and the other person, and is looking at finding ways to work on that relationship. So whether or not he was willing to look at the other person's perspective, whether or not he was willing to identify why there was a tension between the two of them, and what did he do to find ways in working on that relationship. You need to check on these particular aspects to look at a collaborative nature person. Second question is, tell me about a time when you were communicating with someone and they did not understand you, and what did you do? Sometimes, and very often but not, you're trying to communicate something to someone and they do not understand it, and what did you do to make sure that they are trying to understand, or they understood it? So what you're looking out for is patience, right? Leaders need to have a lot of patience and need to look at these people. Great collaborators take time to make sure they're being understood and can adjust their style to align with others. Gone are the days where sometimes you want other people to adjust with you. I think great collaborators are the ones who have that patience and who are making that effort to make sure everybody is aligned with them, they understand the style of working, and there is an alignment. So you need to make an effort when it looks at being collaborative in nature. And when you want others to collaborate with you, obviously you need to make that effort to reach out. And this is a skill set which is an absolute definite needed, right? Third question is, tell me about one of your favorite experiences working with the team and the contributions you made, right? I repeat, tell me about you know a period where your favorite experience with working with the team and the contribution that you made to that particular team. Now, this is what you're looking out for. Um, you're looking for energy, right? And when you're looking at that answer or listening to the answer, you want to find out whether there was an energy during that particular period, whether that person was motivated enough to work as a team. A healthy mix of he needs to be using a lot of I, but it should also have a lot of we, right? So listen to the fact of whether there's a lot of we, because it should not be only I did that and I did this and I did that and I did this. You need to listen to a lot of we, because here we're looking at more of a collaborative or a teamwork that we're looking for. um, both individuals and team needs to contribute. So you need to listen to the fact as to what did he contribute in that particular teamwork, and what were the contributions of other people. You need to probe a little bit more as to whether the particular candidate is also recognizing the work of what the other team members are doing. The fourth question that I would ask is, describe the best partner or superior you've worked with. What part of their management style appealed to you? I repeat the question. Describe the best partner or superior you worked with. What part of their management style appealed to you? Right? Now, obviously, everybody would have worked with different management people. Uh, Sometimes they enjoy working with certain people, sometimes they do not work. But what we want to know is what is the kind of leadership or management style that they enjoyed working with, and what was it that appealed to them, right? Now, what is it that you're listening for, and understanding of their own working style and what kind of personalities they best fit with, right? Guys, a leader must know, or someone at a senior management person must also know what is their working style and who they kind of work well with. Um, Everybody has a different working style. I'm not having a prejudice against anybody's working style, but you need to understand what is your working style and who do you fit well with, right? And that knowledge someone should be able to have, specifically when they're looking for a leadership or a senior management role. My fifth question is, can you share an experience where a project dramatically shifted direction at the last minute? What did you do? Um, we've seen many of that in our own working culture as well. You're working in a project, and suddenly, last minute, the project dramatically shifted in different course. And how did that person react? Now, what is it that you want to listen for? Focus on keeping the team aligned, right? So if the candidate is not talking about him ensuring that his team was aligned, first thing that you want a leader to do is make sure his team is aligned, right? And whether he brought comfort within the co-workers working with him, um, for the additional help. And what did he do? So suppose the project, and it demanded a lot more than it was initially forecasted. How did he make the team feel more comfortable? How did he reach out to them in terms of asking them additional help to bring them to bring the project back to its natural course? These things is something that you want to listen to. Again, I repeat, these are five different questions. You don't need to ask all these five questions, but any one of two of them to check their collaborative skills is good enough for for the same. Now, leadership, right? Um, this is interesting statistic that have come. 50% of people who leave organizations is because of bad bosses. I repeat, 50% of people who leave organizations is because of bad bosses, not because of salary, not because of anything else, but because they have a bad boss. Now, you obviously want to check certain leadership skills of that particular person. I have got 5 questions out here as well. The first one is the most popular. Tell me about the last time something significant didn't go according to plan at work. What was your role? What was the outcome? I repeat the question. Tell me about the last time something significant didn't go according to plan at work. What was your role and what was the outcome? Now, what is it that you want to listen for? You need to listen for thoughtful reflection and a strong sense of ownership. You need a leader at this point of time to be able to reflect thoughtfully, and that the fact that there was a ownership, there was a ownership in what went wrong. True leaders don't shift the blame to others. I repeat, true leaders do not shift the blame to others, but consider what they could have done differently. So, if it's a leader and things are not going as per plan, which very often does, you need to look out for people who are not shifting the blame to others, but who are very thoughtful and reflecting and are thinking of what they could do differently at that point of time. The second question in the leadership skill paradigm is, describe a situation where you needed to persuade someone to see things your way. What steps did you take? What were the results? I repeat, describe a situation where you needed to persuade someone to see things in your way. What steps did you take and what were the results? Now, what is it that you're listening for? Strong leadership or strong leaders establish credibility and use compelling evidence to reinforce their viewpoint rather than acting like they know best. Um, Very often, and let me tell you this, sometimes you will have a team, and in fact, more often but not now, you will have a team which does not, agree to your viewpoint necessarily. Now, as a leader, you need to convince your team, right? Now, gone are the days if someone is saying, boss, I know everything, just do what I say, right? You don't want that kind of a leader in your organization, right? You need someone who's going to give hard evidence in terms of why what he is saying is making sense, and he convinces the opposite person on facts rather than any kind of a strong just maneuvering that person in terms of doing things because he has a particular leadership position. Remember, you're looking for someone who has got backed evidence, who did it in a more polite way, who kind of convinced the team, and not someone who just hand-holded them and arm-twisted them and said, okay, chalo, do what I say. The third question, tell me about a time when you led by example. What did you do and how did others react? A very interesting question. Tell me about a time that you led by example. What did you do and how did other people react? What is it that you want to listen for? Understanding on how the behavior impacts those around them. So you need to know, and a candidate, okay, needs to know as to what was the behavior that he or she depicted, and he needs to know how it impacted others. That they hold themselves on high standard and are inspiration to the teams. So a leader needs to know he's a leader, right? And that what he does will inspire the team, right? Remember, you're not looking for leaders who are not inspiring. You're not looking for leaders who are dandamaru. You're looking for leaders who can inspire others to do things, right? So A leader needs to know how his behavior is impacted, and he need to be conscious of the fact as to what they do or what they say is impactful to others, and more often but not, they need to be inspiring and not the other way around, right? My fourth question: tell me about the toughest decision you have made in the last 6 months. Very important. Tell me about the toughest decision you've made in the last 6 months. What you want to listen for is careful considerations of the outcome. Great leaders seek advice when needed it, but they don't shy away from making the final decisions. Now, what you want to listen for again is whether the particular candidate was, when he was taking the decision, whether he was, considerate about the outcomes that that particular decision would bring to the table. A lot of leaders look at taking decisions just by themselves. You want to know whether that particular candidate actually took advice from other people, because taking advice when you're making tough decisions is very, very important, right? And after taking the decision, or after taking the advice, sorry, after taking the advice, was the person procrastinating too much over it, or did he just take the final decision? Good leaders are the ones who who evaluate the outcome, who seek advice, and who are basically then taking the final decision. It takes a lot of courage for a particular uh, leader to take a decision, and because everything is riding on his back, right? But you need someone who can take a decision, good or bad. Finally the decision may bring success. There could be certain bad decisions, but you want to know whether the leader is capable enough of making a decision. My fifth question: have you ever had to sell an idea to your coworkers or a group? How did you do it? What were the results? I repeat, have you ever had to sell an idea to your coworkers or group? How did you do it? What were the results? Now, the things that you want to listen for: a certain assertiveness without being pushy, right? Leaders need to be assertive sometimes. They don't need to be pushy. There is a huge difference between being assertive and pushy, and you need a leader to know that difference, right? The ability to create a dialogue and listen to the concerns of the opposite person, with the ultimate goal in mind, and making everyone happy about that plan. um, Obviously, when you're sharing an idea, there will be concerns. There will be certain question answers that will happen. Now you need a person that is going to listen to everybody, explaining to the person what is the final goal in that we have to achieve, and making sure that the whole team understands that this is all happening towards a particular goal, and the idea is to reach that particular goal. And not get too influenced between the question answers. Sometimes what we've seen is leaders are just constantly selling their idea, and are not actually getting to the goal, right? So they're only having a dialogue. The idea is to have a dialogue, but keep reiterating to the particular person with whom you're having a dialogue, that what, let's look at the question answers, and let's look at the dialogue between both of us, as long as it's making sure that it's heading towards the final goal, right? You don't want to be wasting your time with just trying to argue with each other. The dialogue must be constructive enough to make the person reach the final goal. So again, these are the five questions that I have in order for you to evaluate the leadership skills of the person. I'm going to move to the next thing, is growth potential. Uh, Now, this is a foot, a hammer on the foot for us, and typically speaking, uh, you need to look for people with growth potential, because the it's often said that the cost of replacing a particular candidate is 1.5 times more than his salary, right? So most people would look for candidates who have growth potential, versus then hiring someone who doesn't have growth potential and then replacing the candidate later. Five questions that we need to look out for. The first one being the most popular one: recall a time when your manager was unavailable when a problem arose? How did you handle the situation? Who did you consult with? I repeat the question. Recall a time when your manager was unavailable when a particular problem arose. How did you handle the situation? Who did you consult? Now, what is it that you're listening for? Their ability to rise to the to the occasion and stepping up. There is going to be a time when the manager is not there, right? But did someone from the team said, no, okay, don't worry, I will take charge, and and let me step up to the occasion, right? And that's what you're listening for from the candidate. And this very much applies to mid-level candidates, right? Because mid-level candidates are going to be the leaders for the future, and you need to identify whether they have the leadership skill right now or not. Great candidates respect all stakeholders and explore options between making decision. So what you also want to listen to is, did they keep all the people who this decision would impact in mind? Did they have two three different options of making the decision, and did they choose one out of them? Because you just don't want a person to look in one direction and take a decision that direction. That's about it, right? So that's your first question. That's your first answer. The second question: describe a time when you volunteered to expand your knowledge at work, as opposed to being directed to do so. Um, Today, guys, it's very important that people get skilled continuously, people get trained continuously, and what's more important, people do it themselves. Okay. um, I know many organizations where people just organize training sessions, and then they're pushed towards doing that training session. They're forced to do it. Uh, you also want a team member who is willing to upskill himself or herself. You also want a team member who is who is themselves being proactive towards learning something new. Now, what is it that you want to listen to in that answer? Their eagerness to learn and their willingness to ask for resources. Invest in continuous learning and actively seek out new opportunities. Um, this is, according to me, one of the most critical, um, you know, answers, right, that I'm looking out for. At least when I look out for talent, um, you want someone who is reaching out to you, or is reaching out saying that, okay, I want to learn this, and can you help me learn this, right? You want someone who is also themselves investing in learning, right? So the kind of answers that you can look out for is, are they going and doing certain online courses themselves by their own money, right? Because it's going to help them to grow. uh, Investing into books, whether the person is reaching out and looking at growing himself through other ways and mediums, right? So training classes, these things are so common. And if a person has not learned something in the last few months, is not being proactive about learning, would have a certain question whether you want to hire that particular candidate. um, the question number three: what would motivate you to make a move from your current role? um, Many people ask questions like, why would you want to move? But you need to understand the motivation of the person. So the right question to ask is, what would motivate you to make a move from your current role? Now, the things that you need to listen for is signs that the candidate is more invested in growth opportunities, and they are in, as compared to the immediate payoff, that they're interested in being challenged. Uh, when you're looking at junior candidates, they're looking for basically salary rise, etc. Mid-level candidates, senior level candidates are interested in different things. It's not just about getting a higher salary. It's about how they will grow, how they will be challenged. Because most senior level candidates have reached a stage where they've relatively decent amount of money to give a good livelihood. You want to, you don't want to look for a candidate who is not looking for a challenge. You don't want to look for a person who is not looking at growing and looking at new opportunities. Again, you're not looking for a laid back candidate, right? It's not about Okay, give me a nice office and give me a nice secretary, and that's about it. You need someone who's excited about the new challenge that is going to come in play. Now, the question number four that I'd like to ask is, when was the last time you asked for direct feedback from a superior? Why? I repeat, when was the last time you asked for direct feedback from a superior, and why? What is it that you want to listen to that they regularly request for feedback? Guys, it in our day-to-day lives, uh, very often but not, we are so close to someone giving a feedback. A leader is someone who is willing to take feedback, who's in fact asking for feedback, because they know that the only way that they will improve is by seeking feedback, right? An indication that the candidate sought consultant for self improvement as compared to what they were looking at the previous role, right? So you need for a candidate to know that he's proactive in reaching out. He is actually open to someone consulting him and giving him guidance versus just making a decision and as compared to what he did in his previous role. But you need someone who's constantly giving you feedback. You need someone who's willing to constantly ask for feedback, because that's a great personality skill set of a leader. My question number five: what's the biggest career goal you've achieved? I repeat, what's the biggest career goal that you've achieved? Um, the answers that you want to listen to is, you want to listen to whether that person has a motivation and a drive, right? Um, Today, everybody is so goal oriented, right? And people who are not motivated and who are not driven towards goals, I have a serious question on their ability to lead organizations, right? So you need someone with motivation and drive. The candidate isn't boastful, so you don't meet a guy saying that, I did this, right? You need a candidate who is a little more humble and who's talking about it. Uh, they take pride. They obviously, you need someone who's taking pride in their achievements, and um, use each one's help to be more successful. So what you want to listen to is, you don't want to listen to a boastful candidate. You don't want to say, I did this and I did that. Of course, they need to have certain pride, but more importantly, they need to recognize the fact that they took help for everybody else. They need to listen to the fact as to how someone else also helped them in terms of achieving their goals, right? So this is what you want to look out for. You need to look out for a more humble candidate. Remember, there's a difference between having a subdued candidate versus a humble candidate. You need a humble candidate. You need someone who's proud about them achieving. But if he's not driven by goals, if he's not motivated enough, thoda challenge hai, guys. Now, prioritization, right? Today, you need to look out for candidates who know how to plan, who know how to organize, and who know how to prioritize. Remember, guys, on our desk today, there are a zillion things that come up, right? Even in our minds today, a lot of things keep coming up. Um, when you look out for a leader in your organization, you need to have someone who knows how to plan, who knows how to organize, and who knows how to prioritize. Now, obviously, there are ways to judge that, and I've got five questions again where you can judge, whether they have the skill sets to do it. I'm also going to give you answers for the same. The first question: tell me about a time when you've had to juggle several projects at the same time. How did you organize your time? What was the result? I repeat the question. Tell me about a time when you had to juggle several projects at the same time. How did you organize your time, and what was the result? Now, what is it that you're listening for? A clear and proactive process in organizing their time, like blocking off their calendar, creating a to do list, and confirming with deadlines. You need to understand this, right, guys? Today, forget leaders, any particular employee in your organization must know what it means to blocking your calendar for certain things, restricting yourself, not getting distracted, right? creating a to-do list, right? There are going to be several things that you will have to do, but are you in the habit of creating a to-do list and and adhering to time, deadlines? Deadlines are important. It just can't be that you're going to be keeping on doing things without a timeline in place. So you need a particular candidate who understands this particular aspect and who's done this, right? And last time when they had multiple projects coming at the same time, how did they go about doing this? Did they show these particular traits? The second question that I have is, tell me about a project that you planned. How did you organize and schedule the tasks? I repeat, tell me about a project that you planned. How did you organize and schedule the tasks? Now, what is it that you're listening for? A methodological approach into planning and strong self-discipline when meeting deadlines and driving a project through to completion. So you want to listen to whether the person had a particular process or a methodology to achieve that, whether he was doing it with self discipline, meeting the deadlines, and did it reach the project completion. Because someone who's done it properly as per process, was disciplined enough, and has brought it to the end result, is a great candidate to have. My third question: describe a time when you felt stressed or overwhelmed. How did you handle it? I repeat, describe a time when you felt stressed or overwhelmed. How did you handle it? Or what is it that you're listening for? Signs that planning and prioritization help the candidate to stay calm and focused, but they also know how to lighten the load by delegating the tasks. So obviously there are candidates who will feel stressed, who will feel overwhelmed, because that's what work life asks for. But while people will say things like, yes, we prioritize these things, and we recognize the fact that that focus and the prioritization help them to cope with that particular situation. What you also want to listen to is whether they actually delegated the task to someone else. So what I would not like to have is a candidate who's fully stressed, sitting on their workspace and trying to deal with everything by himself or herself. I want to look at a candidate who is in leadership position, delegating things to others to reduce his or her own stress, and make sure that they continue to be focused on what the end result of the project is. The question number 4: give an example of a time when you delegated an important task successfully. Uh, I'm going to come to the answer to this, but I'm going to repeat the question once again. Give an example of a time when you delegated an important task successfully. What you want to listen for: an understanding of how to delegate and drive success. It's not about just delegating, right? It's all about delegating successfully and making sure success comes in its place. So it's just not about giving a task, it's also about understanding how and why you're delegating that particular task. Candidates who are great at prioritization make sure that they're clear about deadlines and expectations. So, what you will listen to is, I was aware about there were certain expectations from me. I was aware about there were certain deadlines, and this is why I delegated that particular task in this particular manner. This is what I thought about why I'm delegating it. This is why I delegated to this particular person. So there has to be a thoughtfulness in delegation. It just can't be, okay, I have too many things on my table. You do this, you do this, you do this, and you do this. It's all about being thoughtful about how you delegate. Um, Question number 5: how do you determine what amount of time is reasonable to a task? Oh my God, how many times have we got leaders who give certain tasks and give unrealistic timelines, right? I feel pity for those people working under such team leaders. Uh, Please don't do this to your team members. Please ensure that you're giving them a sufficient timeline to complete it. Now, what is it that you're listening for? Signs that they think carefully about how they're spending their time, and that they seek a healthy middle ground between rushing and perfectionism. Um, so, a leader needs to be very conscious about the fact as to how they are spending their time also. Because if they don't know how they're spending the time, they will not know, how much time is important for the other person to complete a timeline. They need to also know, uh, and prioritize, how much time is it going to take for the other person. But more importantly, I think a leader needs to know as to how much time to give, so that the particular task delegated does not become a situation where it's rushed up, but does not become a situation that it is just being done to the end of being perfect. Remember, being perfect is not a requirement nowadays, right? The idea is to get a job done sometimes and not just being perfect all the times. In fact, more often by not, I've seen tasks being left incomplete because they're not perfect, right? Don't strive for perfectionism in every single thing. I think the idea is you need to look out for things which are less perfect but is getting the role done. Of course, you don't need to be rushed up as well. And similarly, that's a skill set you need to look out for in a leader that you're looking out for. So that's about it, I guess. I've got these few questions, and I've got a few, things that I'd like to share with you in further videos. But I think this is what I would like to suggest for you uh, in a way of how you could hire senior level talent. So we've covered adaptability, culture add, collaboration, leadership, growth potential, and prioritization. I hope this added value to you. I hope this will help you recruit better talent. I've made this, so that not only the talent corner family, but those who are hiring senior level talent could also hire right. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you, and have a great business year ahead. Thank you.